Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Today we're going to start a new unit or a new chapter, if you want to call it. So the reason why I decided to kickstart with a new unit today is that I think you guys will be on a test week. I think from Friday until the end of next week, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So after that week, I'm not sure that we going to have class because I may not be around. So yeah, so I judged it better for us to cover this chapter today. And in case we don't finish it today, we can finish it on I don't know. We are meeting on Thursday. We can finish it on Thursday. Yeah, finish it on Thursday, and then after probably we can talk about the test. So on top of that, in regard to the test, um I think at some point you guys also need to take your own responsibilities. Why am I saying that? We can be meeting every week, having exercises, you have to solve them together and all that. But if yourself, you don't go back home and try to practice on your own, that usually it doesn't even serve anything. So what I'm planning to do is that I'll usually especially at this point, you probably need a bit of guidance with the theory. But in terms of the calculations, you guys already know what is going to happen in the test, right? I mean, the clear concept that are going to come in when you are talking about the calculations. So what I'm trying to say is that based on the questions that you have covered so far in regard to the calculations, please try your best to practice them, go back, reflect on them. If there are specific areas that you guys don't understand, you can, book for a consultation. If you want the consultation to be done online, you can also let me know. We can have that consultation online. So yeah, so you have everything that you need. I have also posted the slides online for chapter 8 and chapter 9. So those are the two chapters that the test will be based on. This chapter that you are going to cover today, I told you is not going to come in test 1, but obviously it's going to come um, in the next test after test 1. So that is test 2. So at some point you'll be referring to this theory if necessary. So that's why I decided to have this session online. So in case, in case you need some reference in regard to the content in this chapter, you can always go online and retrieve the recording. All right, so we're going to start now. And as you know, when I'm sharing my screen, I won't be able to see your hands. But if you have something to say it, please feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to interrupt me and then ask your question. All right, so let me share my screen. Just as I'm sharing my screen, yes, I think our final assessment, we might be shifting the date because our final assessment is scheduled for the 24th of October. And management services, they are also having an exam on the same day. So yeah, so I'm planning to shift our final assessment probably to the 1st of November. I'm not quite sure. I will let you guys know. Yeah, so just a heads up, just to let you know that there might be some changes coming up. All right. I hope you guys can hear me properly. So today we're going to talk about supply chain management. What is supply chain management? So that is the topic of our discussion today. And this heading, you can find it in chapter 11 from your textbook. All right. So and again, if you cannot hear me also, because I'm using a headset here that I really don't trust. So probably at some point it's going to let us down. Um, so yeah, the topic of the day is supply chain. What is supply chain? So first of all, what are the key learning objectives of this chapter? So this is what I'm expecting you to, to be loaded with at the end of this chapter. So you should be able to explain the strategic importance of the supply chain, identify 5 supply chain strategies, explain issues and opportunities in the supply chain, and lastly, describe approaches to supply chain negotiations. So these are the objectives that you or the concept that you should grasp once we conclude this chapter. So first of all, we need to understand what supply chain management is all about, right? Because we need to put it into context in order for us to also understand the different strategies that will be used in order to manage a chain of supplies. It says here, supply chain management is the integration of the activities that procure materials and services, transform them into intermediate goods and the final product, and deliver them to customers. I'm sure you might find this too long, lengthy, but this definition or description provide us with all the elements that are important when you are talking about supply chain management. And in this definition again, you have some aspect of productivity. Remember, we say that productivity is the transformation, right, of input into output, which are finished goods or finished product. In the same definition, it says that transform them into intermediate goods and the final product and deliver them to the customers. So when we are talking about supply chain, we are referring to the raw materials, right? Raw materials, right? From raw materials to where raw materials are received at the processing plant, right? And then they are transformed until the final product, which is called the finished good, is produced or comes out of the production line. The finished product comes out of the production line. And then that finished product is now delivered to the customer for usage. So when we are talking about supply chain, we are now talking about all the activities, right, that are taking place from raw materials through the transformation of those raw materials until the customer receives the product or the finished product. So all those activities that are taking place. Yes, somebody want to say something? Um, there was a voice there that I heard. I don't know if somebody want to interrupt me and say something. I don't know. But if you want to say something, just unmute yourself and then you can interrupt me straight away. But if you're not saying anything, you don't want to say anything, please make sure that your mic is off. All right, so those activities from raw materials through the transformation of those raw materials until the finished good is delivered to the customers. We are going to see how to manage those activities. So this is also the essence of supply chain management. And this is why it says below that competition is no longer between companies, it's between supply chains. So this now depends on how the company interact, right? Interact with its suppliers. So here we also need to make a kind of differentiation or put some marks here. So when I'm talking about a company, right? A company meaning that is the company that procures material or buys materials from its suppliers, right? And the vendor, we're going to talk about the vendor could also be a supplier or a distributor. So because if you are talking about supply chain from raw material to from raw material through where the raw materials are transformed until the finished good is delivered to the customer. When the finished good is being delivered to the customer, that process is usually completed by a third company or a third party company or another company that works with the buyer company or the company. So when I'm referring to the company here, is almost the company in middle, the one that is procuring the raw materials from the supplier, transforming them, and giving them to the distributor for the finished product to be delivered to the customer. So we really need to be clear about that. Otherwise, we are going to get lost at some point because we'll be talking about the company, the supplier, the company, the supplier. So if you don't put a disclaimer there or bring some clarity there, we're going to, get mixed up at some point. Right. So this is a beautiful representation of a supply chain of a beer production or a processing. So here we say that supply chain start with raw materials. So in the process of making beer, for instance, the ingredients or the raw materials that are needed are hops and grains, and these are obtained from the farm. And from the farm, they are sent to a plant when they are probably sorted out, right? That's why you have that right? That those kind of containers there on top it's written hops and grains. So they are sorted out, cleaned and all that. And once that is ready, right, the hops and grains are sent to the processing plant. This is the actual place where the hops and grain are going to be brewed, right? So once the beer is ready, bottled, and all that. It's now sent to the distribution center, right? The distribution center is now where the bottled beers are, stored, and from there they are now sent to the retail market, right? To the shops, whereby you as a customer can access them, can buy them as much as you wish, right? So this provide a clear picture of a supply chain, that how do we manage all the activities taking place here? How do we manage them? So what are the strategies that we can use in order to manage these activities? Because there are, a lot of activities going on here. As an operations manager, how do you manage them? Right? So we're going to provide you with some insight that are not, complete, but they are going to help you in order to get a preliminary understanding on what you should focus on. Obviously, there are other problems, other activities that may come up during the process, right? But an operations manager, you need to be equipped with those, general, how can I say general? Not really general, preliminary, understanding of how to deal with, regular occurrences of issues and all that. So, global supply chain issues. So it says supply chains in a global environment must be able to react to the sudden changes in part availability, distribution, or shipping channels, import duties, and currency exchange rate. So I don't know if you guys remember when the war started in Ukraine, where Russia invaded Ukraine in the operation that the Russian called the special the special military operation, right? And you saw that at some point there was a problem in terms of the availability of part, right? Of car parts, and also the world market also was a bit low, was suffering from that war due to some shipments that were stopped. So the business environment was almost corrupt at that point. Why? Because there was some kind of instability. So the availability of certain items were not available. I still remember we're even crying here in terms of the inflation. Some items were too expensive, right, due to that war. So as an operations manager, you must also be prepared for that, especially if you as a company are getting procuring your product or your raw material from outside whereby you do not have the control. And this is also speaks to the kind of currency, the exchange rate that you as an operations manager need to know, right? Imagine if you are sourcing, or I mean, not so, yeah, you are getting your raw material, let's say from Egypt. How are you going to deal with the currency rate or the different exchanges? Because in Egypt they don't use the rands, and you have to get the dollar in order to convert it, the dollar into the Egyptian currency. All those things. So as an operations manager, you need to have a global view of all those things. And in terms of import duties and all that, customs. So you need to have people with the right skills in order to help you in the process. Using the latest computer and transmission technologies to schedule and manage the shipment of part in and finished product out. So as we are in the era of 4IR, right? Technology is evolving, is also facilitating, the exchanges between partners, between companies. So this point is just motivating us, right, or motivating managers to ensure that the latest technology, right, is used in terms of processing certain operations, upskilling also the employees that are using the technology, right? This is going to help the company grow, right? And I know the investment into new technology could be expensive, but you must have a long-term objective, because in the long run, you're probably going to have some good margin returns. So those things need to be taken into account. As technology evolves, companies also need to adapt their operations, their processes to the new technology practices. Um, Staff with local specialists who handle duties, freight, customs, and political issues. So this is having the right people on ground, in order to handle certain operations while the company is importing, raw materials, perhaps from overseas, you need to have that. And depending also on what the company is doing, if the company export, products to other countries, it also has to have the right people there, people that understand, the employees that understand how the the market in terms of duties, customs that need to be, considered in order to facilitate the flow of materials or raw materials or finished good from one country to another, right? Because remember when we were talking about globalization, you say that well, globalization means that companies find their customers worldwide, right? Find their customers worldwide, the skilled worldwide. So you as an operations manager, how are you going to deal with that? Because at some point you might need the skills, right? You need the right people at the right place in order to facilitate the shipping of your product. How are you going to go about doing that, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to make money. If there is um, a component of your processes, right, or your activities that is going to hinder the successful operational how can I put it, operational, objectives, that is going to be a problem because you won't be able to make money. At the end of the day, it's all about making money, right? You have to do everything possible from your side in order to reduce the kind of risks, right, that may come up during the process, and that those risks are kept at low level so that they do not impact your operations, right? So make or buy decisions. So we're going to have different concepts, coming in this, but I'm sure at the end you will be able to understand this, even if I will be bringing some concept here, because you can explain this from different perspectives, but I will just give you guys an overview. But some concept we're going to develop them in chapter 16 or toward the end of the chapter. So reasons for making. So for making here is basically for the company to produce a given product itself, right? And also could be to buy or to make its own, raw material, or be in the process of, getting its raw material itself instead of buying the raw material from suppliers. And this has different dynamics because for a company to make its own product, usually what does the company do? It has to buy the supplier, probably used to supply the company with the raw material, so that that supplier will be now part of the part of the company. So that is something that you can consider or explain the process of buy of making. So now, what is motivating uh, companies to make their own product? Maintain core competences. So at UJ, for instance, I remember, I don't know, 1 year back or 2 years back, I asked some student what are the core competencies of the University of Johannesburg, and some of them couldn't find. But what you should understand here is that what is UJ is known around the world for, right? We know that it's a higher learning institution, but how is UJ known around the world, right? We know that UJ, the core activities of UJ is teaching and learning and research innovation, right? So that is what UJ does at the world class level, right? So UJ refers to focus on those core activities. Why? Because that's what defines the institutions. So UJ cannot give those activities to another company to perform them on their behalf. Can you see? So So one of the objectives is to maintain, or one of the reasons that motivate companies to make their own product is to maintain core competencies, which are crucial for the uh, the permanent existing of a company. Lower production cost. So as I mentioned, there are different dynamics, right, that come with this concept of making or buying decisions. So lower production costs. As a company, you feel like, okay, making the product yourself, right, is cheaper than buying from a supplier, right? That would depend on your evaluation of your environment, your industry, and also your objective. What are you planning to achieve, right? Unsuitable suppliers. So this goes to the trust. Probably don't trust um, to work with other companies. Probably they won't supply you with the best quality product and all that, or raw materials. So you prefer to make those items or raw materials yourself. Assure adequate supply quantity or delivery. So this goes again to the trust that the company does not trust its suppliers or distributors, so it prefers to do all the activities itself in order to ensure that whatever the company needs in terms of the quality is going to get it. The quantity that it has to manufacture per day, it can get all those things. So again, this depend on the company, on the industry, then the company's objectives, because at the end of the day, it boils down to the cost, right? Boils down to the cost. Utilize surplus labor or facilities. So this is creating some kind of, employment for the community so that, more people can be employed, and using the facilities that are probably empty in order to expand the business activities and employ more people. I mean, helping the community, because at the end of the day, the company has to be impactful towards the community that it serves. Now, it serves. Obtain desired quality. So, if a company is not sure that the suppliers are going to supply um, the product or the raw materials that are of good quality, the best thing to do is to make them yourself if the skill, the capability, right, is there. Otherwise, the company has to behave otherwise. No, I mean, buy the materials or whatever it's need from the suppliers. Remove supplier collusion. So remove corruption, because if a company is dealing with suppliers, there might be some, activities related to corruption and all that. So the company might decide to make those products or raw materials themselves, right? And again, when I say make here, could be buying a supplier, right? And then that supplier will be part of the organization. So, and then the organization has control over all the activities that are taking place upstream. And upstream is getting the raw material. Downstream is not distributing the raw material to the customers. So just to clarify those two terms. Um, Protect personnel from layoff. I mean, this is clear as the organization makes the product, a lot of people are given employment opportunities, right? So no one is going to lose his or her jobs there. So that is one of the benefits that making the product itself as a company is a good option. Protect proprietary design or quality. So this also speak to the trademark or the trade secret, right? That are not, cannot be displayed out there. So the company cannot, licenses some of its its how do you call it, its knowledge to a third company. Like I was saying for UJ, for instance, UJ cannot have research and innovation done by another university or another company. Those are the core activities that UJ has to keep at all costs, because that is where UJ is being recognized around the world for, right? So that cannot be, outsourced, but we're going to talk about outsource at a later stage. Increase or maintain size of a company, right? So with developing the business, using the facility. This point is also related to point number 5 and point number 8, right? So giving people more jobs, the company makes more money, and then the company can expand, right? Once the company expand, it requires more manpower, right? In order to keep going, keep growing. Now, reasons for buying. What are the reasons for buying, right? What is motivating a company to buy, right? As I was saying there, buying probably a supplier, buying a distributor, and once a company buys a distributor, that distributor will become now part of the company, right? So one of the reasons is that frees management to deal with its core competencies. I have already spoken about core competencies, right? So the company now want buy, and this also goes with the concept of outsourcing, but I don't want to, talk about it now. We'll talk about it later, and you can also make reference to this one, right? So management now can focus on core activities, right? And external activities could be, given to another company to perform them, and then the company itself can now focus on the main or the core activity. The core activities is lower acquisition cost. So again, it depends on the cost implications, right? What is good for the company in terms of the cost? Is buying going to reduce the organization spending? If yes, yes, let's go for it, right? Preserve supplier commitment, right? For buying, meaning that there is could be a long-term relationship with a supplier, because um, there are some other philosophy that can be brought in when you are talking about preserving supplier commitment, such as just in time. But again, we're going to talk about just in time, that is called JIT in chapter 16. We'll talk about it. So I don't want to talk too much about it now. So, right. So creating a partnership that is going to, um, allow the company and the supplier to be on the same level, to understand each other's philosophy in order to work together, right? Reduce inventory cost. So, creating, establishing a partnership with suppliers, meaning that the company now can receive materials or raw materials from suppliers at the right quantity when those materials are needed, and at the exact place where they are needed, so that they can enter the production system, right? So that's why we are talking about reduce inventory cost. And ensure alternative sources. So this is also speaks to dealing with, various suppliers, various dealers, distributors, right, that are available on the market for the company to select from, right? That's why I say ensure alternative sources. Item is protected by a patent or trade secret. So let's say you are operating, you want to probably sell Coca-Cola items. You cannot produce Coca-Cola yourself, right? Because that product is protected by the patent or the trade secret. So for you as a business to start manufacturing them, you must be given the license to do so. And usually that is expensive for the company. So what do? You prefer to procure those products from Coca-Cola and then you sell them as a business if you have a value added to those product. So this is critical, right? Because if you go ahead and manufacture the product, I mean another company's product, that without you having the license, hey, that is a huge you can be prosecuted as a business. And from an operations management perspective, we do not, recommend such practices. We want everything to be done in the on the table, not under the table. Right. So talking about the concept of outsourcing, it says that outsourcing is transferring traditional internal activities and resources of a firm to outside vendors. So vendors here are suppliers, right? Distributors, they are outside. They are not part of the company, right? These vendors are outside. As I said, the company, its suppliers, and distributors. So it says that transform traditional internal activities and resources of a firm to outside vendors. So if you want to bring this concept to our, our environment of UJ, for instance, a company such as you can take many examples to illustrate this. A company such as Starbucks, right? Starbucks, this company that transport student and UJ staff from one campus to another. It's not a UJ company. It's not a UJ company. This is a third party company. So the activity of transporting student and staff from one campus to another is performed by Starbucks, which is not a UJ company. So UJ decided now to let go of the transporting of student and staff, right? Give it to a third party company, right? That activity to be performed by a third party company so that UJ can focus on its core activities, which are teaching and learning, research, innovation. Can you see? So that activity can be performed by a third party company without affecting, the core activities. So, but it doesn't mean that the activity that is being outsourced is not important to the company's operation, but the company can keep, can put 100% focus on its core activities while these peripheral activities are being performed by a third party company. So, let's say if you now want to get involved in this transporting, student and staff from one campus to another, that means that UJ will be subjected to buying buses, right? And those buses must be certified, inspections, and all those, obstacles that could come with the certification of a transportation company, right? Because UJ doesn't have any expertise in transportation. Can you see? So this is where it's important, right, for an operations manager to identify what activities is, worth outsourcing and which one is not. And again, this depend on the cost. Is this going to be beneficial for the company or not? So different activities could be outsourced here, right? Not only transportation. So you have IT based activities could be outsourced, accounting, legal, logistics, and production, right? So it's only not only transportation. So again, this depends on the cost implications so that the company can focus on its core competencies or core activities. So when you are talking about the strategies that are used in order to, manage the chain of supplies, there are five, right? Negotiating with many suppliers, long-term partnership with a few suppliers, vertical integration, keretu. Keretu is a Japanese word for, company coming together, but we're going to explain that in the next slide. Virtual companies that use suppliers on a needed basis. So here is not virtual company that operates online, but again, we're going to touch base on that in the upcoming slides. So many suppliers. So this is one of the strategies, right? A company can decide to, have or establish, or buy products, raw materials from many suppliers. And this is usually based on the price. It says that commonly used for commodity products. So commodity product here are products that need to be transformed in order to get the finished product. One of the products that I like also referring to that you guys know is, for instance, crude oil, right? Crude oil need to be transformed in order to get fuel, paraffin and all other related kind of petrol or whatever they, right? So, and for the aim here is for a company to, identify suppliers that provide, the commodity product at at the cheapest cost. So meaning that it's not all about, wanting uh, a supplier, but it's all about the product. I mean the price, sorry. So once the price is affordable and also the quality, because you're not going to just get the raw materials, but if they are of low quality, even if they are affordable, I don't think as a that is trying to, thrive or compete would go for those raw materials. So the raw materials that are of good quality and at an affordable price. And establishing a long-term relationship or partnership is not an option here, is not an objective, right? Again, the focus is on price. But when the focus is on price, dealing with many suppliers, meaning that suppliers now will compete amongst them in order to provide you as the buying company with the appropriate price for you. That's what is going to suit you, because as much as suppliers are willing to compete amongst them in order to satisfy you as a business, you you are likely to get the affordable or the cheapest, price of the commodity that can come from those suppliers, right? So suppliers are competing amongst them in order to provide you with the affordable price. Supplier is responsible for technology, expertise, forecasting, cost, quality, and delivery. So meaning that you are just getting the raw materials as you need them, right? All the rest, technology that is involved in order to extract perhaps the raw materials, in order to process them so that they can be sold to you in terms of delivery, all those activities are done by the supplier. But again, you can see this from a different angle, whereby meaning that all the cost, the negative cost or negative activities that are happening, it will be perceived by the supplier. And from the textbook, you have some, I don't know, that section that is talking about the issues, right, faced by the supplier when it comes to supply chain management, especially when a company is not dealing with many suppliers, meaning that at some point the the supplier could run on loss because some of the cost implications are only involving the supplier part, not the company procuring the raw materials. So you can get some insight here or extra insight from the textbook. I don't know if you can get them from the handout, but I will refer you directly to the textbook whereby more insights are provided. A few supplier or a few suppliers, sorry, few suppliers. They say buyer form longer term or let's say long-term relationships with a fewer suppliers. So in other words, the objective here is to create or to establish, right, a relationship with a selected suppliers, right, in order to um, procure the raw materials. And here, at some point, there is a close relationship between the buyer and the supplier. It said this creates value through economies of scale and learning curve improvement. So this means that the procuring company can now buy or produce in large quantities in order to make money. Obviously, if the product or the finished product of good quality, the company is able to make money. They say suppliers more willing to participate in a JIT. So JIT is just in time program, and this is developed in chapter 16, I think our last chapter, right? It says suppliers more willing to participate in just in time approach and contribute to design and technological expertise. So the just-in-time approach, we obviously, like I said, we're going to develop it in chapter 16, but it's a philosophy whereby a company has to create or establish a relationship between itself and the suppliers, right? Suppliers could be upstream, right, and downstream with the the dealers, but is the focus is mainly on upstream, whereby raw materials are received from the suppliers, right, at the right, the right quantity, at the right time, and exactly where they are needed so that they can be processed directly. So this again speaks to the reduction of the inventory. So there is no need to have, an inventory. Why? Because materials are now received directly to the processing plant, right? When they are needed and at the right quantity, right? But again, we're going to, going to talk about it in chapter 16 because the entire philosophy is described in that chapter. Cost of changing suppliers is huge, right? So you have established relationships with some suppliers that you trust, once those partnerships or relationships are non-existent, or they come to a point where you feel like, hey, this relationship is not good anymore, is not beneficial for the business, um, and now you have to find another partners, right? Or you have to establish another relationships with other suppliers, and that's where it becomes cost. All this is all about creating policies, right? And creating policies takes time because they have to be approved. There are some regulations that has to be established. Goals have to be aligned and all those things. So that's why he's saying that cost of changing supplies is huge. All right, but at some point, um, it's unavoidable because if a supplier does not, abide by the agreed terms and conditions, you as a business will be forced now to, halt the relationship. And obviously, it's going to be costly, but you don't have a choice. You prefer to focus on what you can benefit in the long run. Um, Vertical integration. So this is the third the third strategy. It's a vertical integration, developing the ability to produce goods or service previously purchased, or buying a supplier or a distributor. So I don't know if this is clear to you. It said developing the ability to produce goods, service previously purchased, or buying a supplier or a distributor. So here we have the concept of upstream and downstream, or you can also talk about backward and forward, but we're going to explain that. So when we are talking about vertical integration, we usually narrow it down to two concepts. You have a forward integration and a backward integration. So a backward integration is when a company, right, decide to buy a supplier, right? Decide to buy a supplier so that the supplier can be now part of the company. And that is done. That is what you call the backward integration, where a company buys the supplier. And when a company buys a distributor, that is what you call forward integration, right? And we have some example here for floor milling. So you have a company that buy the company that is involved in farming, so that that company can be part of of the company, and the distributors that will be or that are usually involved in terms of delivering the finished product, baked goods, and all that are also bought, and that is what you call forward integration. So what you need to understand here is that when we are talking about vertical integration, there are two aspects, right? Forward integration when the company buys a distributor, and backward integration when a company buys a supplier. So keretu is a Japanese word to show not really the gap, the relationships amongst the company, how they can work together in order to achieve, certain target, or to work on certain project. So that's why it's saying that it's a middle ground between few suppliers and vertical integration. So vertical integration has part of the Keretu, and fewer supplier as also part of the Keretu aspect. So it's that kind of network that can be created in order for companies to, to operate together. So that's why Keretu network is not really, outstanding as long as few suppliers strategy is implemented and vertical integration is also there. So the Keretu networks is not really, outstanding because it's part of few suppliers and vertical integration. So not really for us to waste our time there. Um, Virtual companies. So virtual companies, I think I mentioned this also when I was introducing the four types of strategies. Seeing that virtual companies, yeah, is not a company that operates online, that has some of its employees here in Johannesburg, another one in Cape Town, and then they work online. No, it's not that. We are talking about a company that is mostly involved in designing the product, right? Designing the product uh, uh, without manufacturing the actual design. So if you see one of the examples that you can advance for this is probably Apple, the Apple that the US company Apple. So if you check on most of their product, they are manufactured or assembled outside of the US. But the concept of conceptualizing their brand, all that is done in the US. But in terms of production manufacturing, right, that is now done in China. And I think they have opened another um, uh, um, factory in India, right? So they are only focused on designing, conceptualizing the brand and all those things. But the manufacturing is happening in China and all that. So that is almost a tangible example of a virtual company. And this is also when we're talking about virtual company, this is mainly speaks to companies that operate in the clothing industry. Usually those companies they are only involved in designing the concept, right? The different brand but not manufacturing the actual design. So that's why they rely on relationships with the suppliers or that have to rent facilities, buy equipment and all those things in order to produce the design. So I don't know if that is making sense, but what you need to understand here is that we are not talking about a company that is operating online using software and all that. No, no, no. We are talking about a company that is mainly involved in the designing process, right, without getting involved in the manufacturing or in the production stage. All right. Managing the supply chain. So there are three main element here when you are talking about managing or sustainable management of a supply chain. You have mutual agreement on goals, trust, compatible organizational culture. So mutual agreement on goals is all about balancing the company's objectives, right? Goals with the supplier's goals so that they can fund each other in order to work together. And this is also going to push company to create some kind of partnership, and the just in time philosophy also can be brought in here, right, so that the company can find a common agreement for mutual benefit. And trust, honestly speaking, if you don't trust somebody, right, you don't trust a partner, it's quite difficult to, to do business with that person or with that entity. So business, I mean, trust is crucial, right, in establishing relationships between a company and its suppliers, right? If there is no trust, there is no business. Compatible organizational culture. So this depends on how the company works with its suppliers, right? One of the hypothetical example that I usually take is that imagine you are running a business, you probably you are open from I don't know from Monday to Saturday or Monday to Friday, and your suppliers they only work on weekends, for instance, right? So that creates a kind of a gap that is quite difficult for you as a business to partner with that supplier, because when you are open, right, during your working hours, the supplier is not probably open during that time. So the delivery of raw material um, could represent a huge challenge, right? But there are ways that you can work it out as a business, but it might be challenging. So this goes again to the compatibility of working cultures, right? If the company cannot balance its culture with the culture of the suppliers, it might be difficult to do business. So that means that they are not compatible, right? Um, and this also speaks to in terms of scheduling, late deliveries, and all that. And that is again shows that there is no compatibility between a company and its suppliers. And the company need to move on and look for suppliers that share the same work ethics, right, with its operating system. And speaks to the selection of suppliers. But you will see that I think we are almost at the end. You will see it probably in the next two slides. The concept of e-procurement speaks to our current, era whereby technology is taking the world by storm, right? So everything we do, if you really want to scale up, it's usually a good idea to bring technology or to implement technology or automation, right? So when we are talking about e-procurement, we are talking about the utilization of internet in order to for a company to procure, right, raw materials from its suppliers, right? You could be operating here in South Africa. Your raw materials are in China, right? So how do you do in order to buy product from raw material from product or raw material from China to South Africa? So you don't need to travel, right? In the service industry, for instance, we are buying product from China using Alibaba, right? You don't need to travel and go to China, right? I remember I recently bought a machine because I'm involved in the in the cashew nut business. So I process cashew nut. So I needed a machine from China. I bought it last year. I needed a machine from China. And imagine if there was no internet. So that means that I was going to make some kind of arrangements in order to travel to China and buy the machine from there. But I didn't do that. What I did is what I just went on internet and I used Alibaba. I spoke to the manufacturer there in China and I paid, I did everything online, and they sent me all the paperwork and all that, and I purchased the machine from China and it was delivered here in South Africa. Can you see? So this is what e-procurement can, the advantage that e-procurement can bring to us, right? And if you want to talk about a large scale, purchasing, so all this could be done online without you as an employee, have to travel to China and all that. Everything is done online. You can monitor, you can track the items and all those things, right? So that is the essence of e-procurement. And I think that you might have a question like this probably in your assignment. I'm not quite sure because I haven't compiled the assignment yet. All right. So um, this is our last slide. This is our last slide. Um, Talking about the vendor selection. So it's basically talking about selecting a supplier. So there are some kind of evaluation that need to, evaluation requirements that need to be, reached here, right, or conducted in order to identify a proper supplier or suppliers for a business. They say this process considers numerous factors such as strategic fit, vendor competence, delivery, quality, performance. So the vendor selection will be examined as a three-stage process. So there are three uh, stage processes here that need to be taken into account for a company to select a supplier or suppliers. So the first one is negotiations. So before, selecting a supplier or endorsing a supplier, you as a company, you have to do some kind of market research, right? You check which suppliers that are operating in your environment that could supply you with the best probably raw materials, right? Raw materials, the best product. Which one? You select the one that you think uh, are available and could help you in terms of procuring raw materials, right? So negotiations have to be initiated, right? Have to be initiated. And once you are now in contact with the suppliers or the supplier, you now need to evaluate that supplier. How are you going to evaluate that supply? That will be based on the supplier's performance, right? Supplier's performance, you check their certifications, right? Depending on their market, you might use the international standard organization called the ISO, and there are different kind of ISO. You have ISO 9000, ISO 14,000, ISO 22,000. So all these certifications, right, are good, are going to help you in order to, understand the level of performance of that supplier, right? And once you have evaluated, right, the certifications, you are happy with that, probably there are some aspects of the suppliers that you are not comfortable with, right? And what do you do at that case? You have now to provide the training, right? That's what you call vendor development. You, as a business, if you have the skill, you have to encourage the supplier to be trained. They have to go through workshops, upskilling probably the employees that are there so that they can fit or they can respond to your requirement as a business, right? And this is where policies can be developed, right? Terms and conditions in order for you to now enter into a partnership. So you can see after following this process here, there's a strong relationship or partnership that will come out of here. And now, this speaks again to one of the slides that we touched base on earlier, whereby we say changing a supplier is expensive, it's costly. So now imagine after going through all this process and you have to change the supplier, right? Or bring another supplier. You can see the costly part of this process because you still have to do the same thing because those are your standard, your processes that you have to follow, right? You cannot just bring a supplier on board. They have to go through the process. And this is time consuming and also it's costly, right? This is just what I was explaining there. Guys, I think that's what I needed to tell you this afternoon. This is chapter 11, and we have come to the end of the chapter. So that means if we are meeting on Thursday, we will be mainly focusing on the test. Any questions before we take the attendance register? All right. So if there are no questions, let us take the attendance register, and then you guys we can disappear. So let me stop the recording. Okay.